Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. This is quarterback Eddie LeBaron. If you know him for anything, it's probably the 1962 season when he was with the Dallas Cowboys. In 1962, Cowboys head coach Tom Landry famously alternated LeBaron and Don Meredith on every single play. This revolutionary system turned out to be a massive success for the Cowboys, as after finishing with the worst offense in football in 1960 and the second worst offense in 1961, they had the second best offense in 1962. LeBaron made the Pro Bowl, and today is best remembered for his efforts that season. But what you might not know is that this season was never supposed to happen, because at the end of the 1958 season, before the Cowboys were even a team, Eddie LeBaron announced his retirement from the NFL. He was hanging it up, calling it quits, and made his intentions explicitly clear. And then he changed his mind, and changed NFL history in the process. This is the story behind the bizarre retirement of Eddie LeBaron. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context as to just who LeBaron is, because it will help us understand his importance to the game, his role in the sport, and what his thought process was behind his retirement in the first place. When people talk about some of the best quarterbacks who are undersized, you hear names like Russell Wilson, Doug Flutie, and Kyler Murray. But here's the crazy part. Wilson stands at 5'11", while Murray and Flutie stand at 5'10". Eddie LeBaron made it in the NFL, and had an awfully successful career with a height of just 5'7". LeBaron went to Pacific, and was drafted by Washington in the 10th round of the 1950 NFL Draft. However, he didn't play in 1950 or 1951 because he was serving in the military during the Korean War. When he finally entered the NFL in 1952 and joined the team, he was able to get some playing time, starting 7 of the team's 12 games, and positioning himself to becoming the full-time starter once 38-year-old Sammy Baugh retired. He actually finished 4th in the league in touchdown passes that season. While he left the NFL after the 1953 season to join the WIFU, a football league in Canada, he came back to the NFL in 1955, re-signing with Washington. And for the second half of the 1950s, LeBaron, despite his size, established himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the National Football League. LeBaron made it to the Pro Bowl 3 times in a 4-year stretch from 1955 to 58. During the 1957 season, LeBaron finished 4th in the league in touchdown passes, and was one of just 4 starting quarterbacks in football, alongside Johnny Unitas, Tobin Rote, and Tommy O'Connell, to throw more touchdowns than interceptions. He also finished the season with a passer rating of 86.1, which was the second best total in football, and was less than 2 points shy of Johnny Unitas to top the league leaderboard. And in 1958, LeBaron followed that up with another really good season, once again throwing 11 touchdowns, and once again finishing second in passer rating behind Johnny Unitas. Now, nobody was really calling LeBaron the best quarterback in football, but by this point in the late 50s, he was probably a top 3 or a top 5 guy in the eyes of a lot of people. Head coach Joe Coolidge thought so as well, saying there are others who might be able to pass better than Eddie, others who can run better, and others who can kick better. But there is no one who can do all of those things as well as LeBaron. But after a highly successful 1958 season, LeBaron, despite not even being 30 years old yet, made what many consider to be a shocking announcement. He was ready to hang it up. On November 30th, 1958, Washington lost 21-14 to Cleveland. Despite the loss, LeBaron played pretty well. He went 13 for 18, completing over 72% of his passes, which was his best completion percentage of the season. He threw for 189 yards and finished the game with a passer rating of 101.4, making it the 3rd time in his last 7 games that he had a passer rating above 100, which back then was a really big deal. And yet, despite being at the peak of his career, and despite being one of the best players at his position, he decided that it was time to move on from the game. A few days after the game, LeBaron made his intentions clear. After the 1958 season, he would play 1 more season in professional football. After that, once the 1959 season was finished, he was walking away from the game. There were 3 major reasons for this announcement that made it seem like nothing would possibly change his mind. Number 1, he wanted to spend more time with his wife and his kids. Number 2 had to do with what he planned to do after he retired. During the offseason back in the 1950s, a lot of players had second jobs or other occupations. What LeBaron did during his offseason time was attend George Washington University for law school. He wanted to become a lawyer, and apparently he had offers with different firms. It seemed like most of these law firms were based in DC, New York, and along the West Coast where he went to undergrad. LeBaron wanted to settle down and get into the practice. And number 3, he said that he wasn't having fun anymore playing. LeBaron said, frankly, it's become drudgery instead of fun. I love to play on Sunday, but I dread the practice sessions all week. It's hard to concentrate on football when you're also going to law school. It was also hard to have fun when you're constantly losing games. In LeBaron's 6 seasons with the team at the time, they had a winning record just twice, and had been below 500 in each of the past 3 seasons. LeBaron had a ton on his plate, and having accomplished a lot in football while not exactly having fun anymore, he wanted to get out. He would play in 1959 on a farewell tour of sorts, almost like Kansas City Chiefs linebacker Willie Lanier would do a decade and a half later, and then would step away to begin his life as a lawyer. Side note, you can learn more about the Lanier retirement tour by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So how would the 1959 season go? Unfortunately for LeBaron, he didn't exactly save his best for last. When LeBaron announced his plans and announced that he would step away after the 1959 season, it didn't seem like Washington was all too concerned. Team president George Preston Marshall said that he knew that LeBaron was going to play in 1959, and didn't know of anything after that. And head coach Joe Courage said that he didn't actually believe that LeBaron was going to retire, noting that if he really felt this way, that he would have walked away now, and that you will see players announce their retirement a year from now, only to not follow through on that statement. Courage was replaced after the 1958 season ended by Mike Nixon, who was the team's backfield coach for the past 5 seasons, and Nixon was also unconcerned, saying that he knew that LeBaron was going to be his number 1 quarterback going into the new year. In the new year, though, LeBaron struggled. It may have seemed to many like his mind was on law rather than football, because his numbers took a nosedive. His completion percentage, which was 59.3% in 1957, tumbled to 44.5% in 1959. His passer rating, which was 86.1 in 1957, tumbled all the way down to 54 in 1959. He went from second best in the league in that category to third worst. His yards per attempt, which was 9.4 in 1958, dropped all the way to 6.2 in 1959. Whereas he had 4 starts with a passer rating of 90 or higher in 1958, he had no such starts in 1959. He finished the season just 2-5 as the team's starting quarterback, as Washington finished the season with a 3-9 record. It was tied for their worst record in franchise history since moving to Washington, and was tied for the second fewest wins in team history. The only season worst was in 1935, when they were 2-8-1 and were playing in Boston. It was not a good way for LeBaron to go out. Whereas he was still one of the best quarterbacks in football going into the season, he was one of the worst by the end of it. Still, if this truly was the end of the road for LeBaron, then it was a heck of a career. 3 Pro Bowls and nearly a decade in the league is impressive for anyone. For a 5'7" quarterback who was drafted in the 10th round, especially since 10 of the 13 guys chosen in that round in 1950 did not play a single snap in professional football, yeah, that's really impressive. However, as you could probably guess, as has been the theme for a ton of these videos, this was not his last dance. Because something would happen that was not a thing in 1958 that would change LeBaron's mind. In 1960, LeBaron decided that he was going to practice law in Texas. Whether one of the Texas firms was a consideration when LeBaron made that initial announcement in 1958, I'm not entirely sure, but this firm was somewhere in Midland. There was no chance that LeBaron was going to play in Washington in 1960 and change his mind, especially with the firm all the way out in Texas. It would have been too much flying back and forth, and wouldn't have been fair to his wife or his children. If only there was a team he could play with that was nearby. Well, in a case of absolutely incredible timing, in 1960, the NFL added a team in Dallas. This was not planned out. The only reason the NFL went to Dallas, which was announced in January 1960, was because the upstart American Football League was putting a team there known as the Dallas Texans. The fact that there was now a team in Texas made things really interesting. And the expansion team needed a quarterback. Dallas entered the league so late that they didn't even get a chance to draft a team and select any college players. The 1960 NFL Draft took place on November 30th, 1959, 2 months before the Cowboys existed. While the Cowboys liked Don Meredith, who was drafted by the Chicago Bears in the 3rd round of the draft, they didn't want to rush him into things and play him before he was ready. This was especially true back in 1960, when it was incredibly rare to see rookie quarterbacks playing right away. The Cowboys wanted a veteran presence to take the reins. And with that, General Manager Tex Schramm called up LeBaron and wanted to gauge his interest in playing for the team. LeBaron, excited at this new opportunity and suddenly finding a new love for the game, said yes. With that, LeBaron spoke to members in Washington's front office and said that he was going to remain retired and wasn't going to play another snap in professional football unless he got traded to the Cowboys. It just made practical sense at this stage in his life and in his career to play for Dallas. And even though Dallas and Washington were already rivals at this point, the trade was executed. In June 1960, LeBaron came out of retirement and got traded to the Dallas Cowboys. He was going to be the team's starting quarterback, and was going to be the stopgap option while Meredith was learning the ropes. That leaves just one last item of business to talk about. How would LeBaron perform now that he was with the Cowboys, and now that his career had a second life? Things weren't exactly great in 1960, as LeBaron threw 25 interceptions, which was the most in all of football. And it's tough to blame him. Remember that this was an expansion team that received literally no help or support. Head coach Tom Landry would later say, "The worst thing I ever did for Eddie was talk him out of being a lawyer." I guarantee you he took a beating. I hate to say those teams were awful because it would be a discredit to those guys, but we were weak. The Cowboys also went winless that season. However, he did set a career high in passing yards with 1,736, only to surpass that total 1 year later in 1961 by 5 yards. But as mentioned at the top of the video, things would get better, because the 1962 season is the season that LeBaron is best remembered for 60 years later. He led the league with a passer rating of 95.4, which, if we're only including the NFL, was the 7th best single-season passer rating in NFL history at the time. The offense scored 398 points under his watch, averaging over 28 points per game, and this was 1 year after they averaged less than 17 points per game. It was a drastic improvement thanks to the alternating system of quarterbacks with LeBaron and Don Meredith on every single play. I talked about that strategy in a previous video of mine, so you can click the card in the upper right corner if you want to learn more. After the 1963 season, LeBaron hung it up for good, and became a lawyer on a full-time basis. Although this would not be his last time in the NFL, as a decade and a half later in 1977, he became the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, and as an instrumental part of that front office, guided the Falcons to their best run in franchise history at the time. The Falcons had never made the postseason before, and with LeBaron at GM, they made it 3 times in a 5-year stretch. When all was said and done, LeBaron finished his career as a 4-time Pro Bowler and as one of the best quarterbacks of the second half of the 1950s to the first half of the 1960s. And to think that the reason he's remembered so fondly today is because of incredible timing with regards to NFL expansion. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping with the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.